Live from the Icebox Studio, it's the Bill and Corey Show. I'm Bill.
And I'm Corey.
Welcome back. Sorry we had a little bit of technical difficulties, but this is our 20th live stream. We've got some good topics to talk to today, including one has a nice history lesson to it. Well, I'm going to say it's a nice history lesson.
Yeah, we'll let the viewer decide.
Okay, first question. I'm interested in the following gases: hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen, analytical grade with the highest purity available. So he'd like to get a quote for standard size bottles, and also they're looking for, they call them double stage regulators. The discharge or working pressure in the laboratory would be between 0 and 30 psi with adjustable option.
So for the carbon dioxide and the nitrogen, 3810 A regulator would be fine. This is our dual stage regulator, and dual stage regulator, as people may or may not know, has the first stage knocks the pressure down for a more smooth outlet pressure that doesn't change when the pressure drops in the bottle.
For the interstage is set for about 350 psi.
350 psi. For the hydrogen sulfide, that gas has a vapor pressure of 252 psi. And it is toxic and flammable. It is, I was looking up the NFPA diamond on it. It's got a 4 on the health and a 4 on the flammability, and there's no 5. There's no number 5. So, and this would be a 3610A regulator, which is a single stage, would be great for that one, and we would recommend adding a cross purge to it because it is toxic and flammable. Well, mostly because it's toxic.
Because
it's toxic.
Yeah.
And so that you could safely take the regulator off when not using, if you want to, off the cylinder.
Okay. Now this one's a long question here. It says, I have a 7300 series, that's a 2-tube mixing rotometer, and the need for calibration charts. Both tubes are the E601 and are marked with the number 6 on the face of the tube. My confusion is that I can't find calibration tables for 601 E200. You can find calibration tables for the 601 E200 tube and a number 6 E606 tube, but no E601 tube. So, and then, so this, yes.
Hope everybody at home is following along.
You're probably all confused about that. Yes, it is confusing. And we do get questions on this, and I'll kind of the history of things. Well, the 7300 series is our series for the 2-tube mixer, and we've called it that since the mid-70s. Now, to talk about the tubes, I'd like to talk about the history of, this is our FM 1050 rotometer. It's called a tube cube, so you can easily replace the flow tubes inside of it to handle different ranges. So, way back when we started making, I don't know when we started making rotometers, but the oldest catalog I found was from 1967. And back then, we called our this type of rotometer the 620 series. And you would buy just the frame separately from the tubes.
Were you working at Matheson in 1967?
No, I was not working at Matheson in 1967. I wasn't working anywhere in 1967. And then, so back then you would buy the frame and then you'd buy the tube separately. And the tubes had different series on it. So that's where you got your 601, 602, 603, 604, 605. So there was a different series of that. In 1975, we decided to change what we call our rotometers for this kind of rotometer, the 7600 series. So because it has one tube in it.
Oh, okay.
7300s for 2 tubes, 7600s for 1 tube.
That makes sense. It's logical.
Made sense at the time. And then in 1990, we went to our current system of using E numbers for the tubes. Now, if you're totally confused on this, you probably want to go check out our Rotometer guide on our online store, and that will explain a lot of this stuff.
So this stenciling is just legacy stenciling on the tube.
Yes, but it can make things complicated. Yeah. So the if you see a E600 at the top of your tube, that's
or just a 600.
If you see just a 600 stencil at the top of the tube,
that's what's good.
That's a legacy number. It's an E100 series. A 601 would be an E200. A 602 would be the E300. And then it goes, number 4 is the E406 series.
The 406, yeah. 6, yeah.
And what happens was we have 2 series, the 406 and the 606. And that's a 4 for the 406. That makes sense. And a 6 for the 606. That kind of makes sense too. Those were added after the other tubes. So they came out with the tubes, the 600 for the one, E100, and we talked about that. The 603 stencils for E500, the 604 stencils for the E700, and the 605s for the E800. So they came out with those 6 tubes to begin with, and it was a good idea at the time, and then they decided to expand to intermediate tubes, and they kind of didn't want to call it a 602.5.
Well, I think the moral of the story is when you're making new part numbers up for something, think about it long and hard and make them work, you know?
Yeah. So, and then it gets complicated. So that tells you really the number tells you the tube, the glass tube, and there's little floats inside there. Mm-hmm. And that float will determine what that E number is. And there's different, there's different ways of calling it. So if you have a tube, let's say you have a tube that's the 200, well, any series you got. If it's like an E200, it'll have a stainless steel and a glass float in there, and that'll be you can't even see it on here. That'd be like a black float is for glass, and then the stainless steel one, the silver one's a stainless steel one. Now, if you saw a tube that said E201, it would be the same glass tube, but it would just have a glass ball in there, or float. If it was a E202, that would have a sapphire float.
So the last number and then number changes.
It goes from lightest to heavier. And then the E203 would be stainless steel. E204 would go to carbaloy, and then like an E205 would be tantalum.
So the E406 area of the numbers,
And then if you go to the like a E206 or an E406 or an E706, that would also have a stainless steel glass float.
Okay. Right.
So if you go with the 100 series or the 6
it's the same
in
thing.
there, it's the same thing.
Just to avoid confusion.
So yeah, you're probably totally confused by that. Go to the store.mathesongas.com.
Just tell us what gas and what flow rate you need, and we'll help you out.
But all the charts that we have, I didn't bring one to show you. They have the legacy part number on there, so it might say like an E600 tube, and it'll tell you E600 tube. It'll be a 600 tube,
be a 600 tube.
Or a 4 tube or a 6 tube, and it'll show you. And it also has the float material on there too for the right calibration chart. Mm-hmm. So it is kind of confusing, but hopefully I explained it a little bit. But you can always check out the Rotometer guide on our online store at store.mathesongas.com. Okay, next question, we're going to get into purifier questions. Going to have to move that out of the way.
All right. This big old hog.
Yeah. Someone wanted to know the mesh size or number of meshes per square inch for the 460 purifier.
So the 460 purifier, this is what holds the purifier in place, and this is what you put inside the canister that holds the purifier. This is the 460. It is 13x molecular sieve, which has a 1 nanometer or 10 angstrom port size. And of course, angstrom named for the famous Swedish physicist Anders Jonas Angstrom, who was into really, really, really tiny things.
Okay, you all done with that one?
Yeah.
Okay, next one we're getting on to another regulator question. And it says, hello, I'm using your 3122A 580 regulator for an argon cylinder, and I recently noticed some leaking from the CGA fitting. I'd be down at this end, where they're connected to the bottle. The CGA nipple does not have an O-ring, nor does it have a groove for an O-ring in it. Is this normal, or could this be the cause of the leak? If not, what do you think the problem is? Well, what I think the problem is, this is a 3120A series, is a brass regulator. So the inlet connection is brass. Mm-hmm. And what probably happened is you might have like a little nick or burr on your bullet nose of your nipple. That's the sealing surface of the CGA fitting. Or you might have a little nick or burr or something else in your cylinder valve.
Yeah.
And that's probably what's causing your leak. Now, when they're talking about O-rings seals on CGA fittings, many of our stainless steel CGA fittings have an O-ring in there. And it's a size 13 O-ring. We use Viton. We've had customers request different seal materials on there.
Buna or...
Well, they've requested some other exotic materials that we could do. But it's a size 13 O-ring, and that helps assist in the sealing. Because stainless steel is harder than brass, and it can be hard to make a seal with a stainless steel nipple. So that O-ring helps out.
Yeah, so the metal to metal works for the brass because it's softer. Doesn't work as well for the stainless steel because it's harder.
Yeah.
So I still wouldn't use this for a pillow, even though it's softer.
No, you probably wouldn't use it as a pillow. So that's all the questions we have for this week. Sorry for the little technical issues.
Yeah, I hope it was worth the wait.
Yeah. And please tune in next week for another episode of the Bill and Corey Show.
Set your VCRs.